Quite the catwalk coming
It
out.
was good. You did it very well. It was not awkward at all. Cool. So sitting in like Kraft, you guys got a lot going on right now. But like when it comes to this programmatic landscape, I mean, you guys have been sort of leaders at pushing into it.
Yeah.
What ends up being your biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge in the beginning was really the education around it. I mean, we started 2.5 years ago, and it wasn't a programmatic journey per se. It was a data journey for us, an addressability journey, but it was education. It was getting people to understand where the world was going, where media was going, and how we had to buy in, because it was so different than the organization that had existed for the last 20 years, last 30 years. And so for the first time, it was, we're going to do things different. We're going to start different. We're going to have segmentation. We're going to know about consumers. And so I think the biggest hurdle we had to overcome was that education. And then it was the money that we had to put behind it, the people, time, and the money to actually pull off what we were able to pull off.
What needed the most investment to get to where you are now?
Yeah, so when we looked at where we were trying to go 2.5 years ago, we set out a strategy around addressability. And for us, it wasn't good enough to go out and buy kind of third-party data, put it into place, and get into that kind of programmatic world. For us, it was about understanding the consumer, but understanding them over the long haul, not just for that one buy, but understanding that consumer, watch them walk through that journey of purchases, and then and see what we could influence, not just in a single purchase with a coupon or something like that, but really how do we change behavior? And so for us, that investment came around, where do we house that data? Where do we, how do we access it? How do we get it in a place where we can activate it on a normal, weekly, daily media buy kind of schedule versus kind of buying third-party data all the time?
So how much control do you end up taking then in the process versus partners, agencies, and others?
Yeah, and so if you look at how Kraft operates, our agency partner, Starcom, is incredibly integrated into what we do. We don't really look at a separation. They have access to everything. They've been partners that really push us. You can't, in my opinion, you can't take everything in-house and just do everything in-house. You have to have a partner that you can trust. You have to have a partner that's going to push you, that sees other industries, other ways of doing things, that can experiment both on your business, but also bring learnings from other businesses into your unit.
But do you end up, I don't know, because I think that, I hear what you're saying, and I think sometimes it's like sort of overdone with, the idea of marketers taking it all in-house.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's probably what they want to do. I mean, there will be like, the Netflixes and stuff like this, but they're probably the outliers.
But when you look in CPG, there's nobody that's going to be able to bring it in-house and do it perfectly. There's just not. Netflix is a great example. Absolutely, they can. Yeah. You tell me who can do it inside CPG. I don't think it's possible. Not to do it well.
So, but does the what does like the sort of marketer, like as a Kraft, like what do you need to control versus what the agency?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we have to control the consumer. We have to understand who the consumer is, what drives them, what is going to make a difference, right? Those insights that we can derive through that data, that's what we have to own. We have to know our consumers better than anybody else. But when it comes to technology, when it comes to activation, when it comes to putting these things in place in market, that's what we have agencies for. It's what they've done for decades. And now they have to do it differently, and we expect them to operate differently. We leverage them in different ways. I think the skill sets have had to mature on the agency side. We have the type of people we have on our account now versus the type of people we had on our account 2 years ago, drastically different. I would tell you that probably 50% of the backgrounds we had back then are different than we have now. So they had to mature. They had to evolve with what we were trying to do. But we still need them in a pretty important way.
So I would guess, I mean, it's hard to sort of, everyone divides it differently, but how much would you say of your ad buying is now done in some sort of programmatic fashion?
So, the difficulty is always, how do you define programmatic, right? But I think if you look at just from a data layer, the majority of our ad buys are influenced in some level by data. And obviously print you're not going to buy in real time, but our print is still influenced by a data layer. When you look at television, a portion of it's addressable. It's not real-time bidding, but it's addressable, and that goes to that. And then more than 50% of our digital is in pure play programmatic.
So, I mean, you talk a lot about data. This is mostly, the big opportunity here is, I would guess, in your first-party data.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you look at Kraft, this was another one of the advantages we had a couple years ago when we started to look at it. Kraftfoods.com, we get, I think it's 100 million, just over 100 million visits a year. And so knowing those consumers at a deep level, knowing what kind of recipes they're looking for, knowing when they're looking, why they're looking, those types of things, that first-party data is incredibly valuable to us. And we look at the ROI of that data, the payout is significantly higher than we look at third-party. We do use third-party, but we use it judiciously, and we use it in ways that can augment as much as we can out of the first-party data.
Do you think overall the industry has a data quality problem?
Absolutely. I don't think there's anybody that's going to argue with that. I'll give you a couple great examples. We ran a female campaign. We layer on female targeting. We go back and audit, and it's about 50% accurate. And you think about the male-female split in the United States, right? It's a problem. Or you look at one of our campaigns, we were looking for females that were, trendy, and I can't remember all the definitions specifically on it. But when we got into the data, when we look at what determined them being part of that category when we bought it from a third-party perspective, and we drilled down into what was the action that consumer had to take to be considered trendy and kind of red carpet female, it was she had visited a high-end furniture store in the last 6 months. Like the correlation there for me is just not there. And so you have to understand, when did they collect that information? What did the consumer have to do to get put into that classification? There's just so many problems with the quality, the recency, what is the supply chain on that data, that third-party data has a problem, and we've got to get to the bottom of it. Otherwise, some of this stuff starts to fall apart.
So does that mean you're just really not using it that much because you don't trust it?
We use it. But what we've done, and really what our Starcom team has done on the media side, is really start to validate where we're getting the data from, where they get the data, how they classify it, things like that. So we know which data providers we're using. We feel confident. We feel has a handle on, why they're getting that data and how they're getting that data versus, some of these other ones where they have no idea, and they'll tell you that. And I think that it's always on our lap to figure it out. As a CPG, advertiser, it's always on us to say, is the data good or is it bad? Nobody wants to stand behind it. There's providers out there where I'll buy third-party data and then I can pay to have it validated after the fact. It's like, why do I have to pay to have that information validated that it's what I actually paid for in the first place?
Yeah, we had a town hall yesterday, and a lot of publishers were talking about how they're trying to figure out how to use their data in more effective ways. I mean, are there things that you think that publishers specifically can do?
Well, yes, there's things that they can do. I think the problem, and it's always the case, right? It's going to come down to money. Is it valuable for the publisher to do that? Can they charge enough for the impressions that they're losing then, right? It's whether it's viewability, whether it's the quality of their data. I mean, there's numerous angles to this, but it comes down to money. Like, they want to make the same amount of money, and I get that, but I also want my brands to be valuable online. I want to hit the right consumers at the right time with the right message. And so from a publisher standpoint, we've got to figure out, what are they willing to do, and what does that cost, and how is it passed on to me? And I'm willing to pay a little extra to get the right information, to get the right impressions to the right consumers, but we've got to figure out that ecosystem.
So you mentioned viewability, everyone's favorite topic. What is the sort of Kraft stance on viewability? I mean, there's a lot of different, some people are saying, I'm only paying for viewable impressions. Some people say 80%. Like, what's the sort of Kraft standard?
Yeah, first and foremost, viewability is important. It has to be important. And where we get into problems as an industry is, I'll run a campaign and we'll measure it, and the measurement comes back at 40% viewable. It's an issue. 50% viewable. You make a call to the publisher, and the next day your campaign goes up to 70% viewable. So when people know they're giving you crap, Like that's the first problem. But the second problem is the measurement that we use. Like we're never gonna, today you cannot get to 100% measurement. I mean, you guys have reported on this before. You can't get to 100% accuracy on viewability. And so I know there's people out there saying we won't pay for anything that's not 100%. Well, all it's gonna do is shift the cost to, where that waste is gonna come in. And it's not even necessarily waste, it's just impressions that we can't tell, was it viewable, was it not?
So you don't have like a set, like, hey, it has to hit 70%.
No, but I think it depends on the publisher. It also depends on our measurement. Are we getting what we need to out of those impressions? And so we're willing to put up with a certain number. Say it's 70%. I mean, I think 70 to 80% is really where the industry is kind of resonating with the tools that we have to measure it. But for us, it's also performance. So what's happening once we put those impressions out? And if a publisher can only get to 50 or 60%, but we're seeing the ROI incredibly high on those publishers, we may make a choice to continue to invest with them. We'll still push them towards viewability. I think it's an important topic, but for us, selling product at the store level is what's important.
Do you think you have a handle on attribution for what is truly working?
So, I mean, define, right, have a handle on. I think that the historical methods of putting a campaign into market, waiting for the MMA and Nielsen to come back 9-10 months later, by that time you've already planned and trafficked your next campaign, those days have to change and have changed. So are we beyond that? Absolutely. I think today when you look at the industry, you look at the ability to see what people are watching on television, to see all your digital impressions, and through different methods to get to the in-store purchase cycle. Absolutely. Do I think it's perfect? Do I think it's where we need to be? Absolutely not. But are we significantly ahead of where we've been over the last couple of years because of the amount of data that you can now match? For sure. So I think it's directional, but I think it's going to get a lot better.
But what's the biggest specific challenge when it comes to attribution?
I think the biggest challenge is closing the loop perfectly at a scale that's high enough. And then on top of that is things like you look at, so I can see that you saw a digital impression, you saw a television impression, you went out and bought mac and cheese. But you tell me, were you going to buy that mac and cheese anyway? Have you purchased that mac and cheese every other week? Exactly, right? And so that's the problem. You got to take that base out of it in so many, what's the highest ROI? If I hit you, I know you're going to buy mac and cheese to hit you with an impression because it's one impression, one purchase.
Well,
wonderful.
yeah. I mean, that's retargeting, right? I mean, it's like, I'm like, look, I know I was going to go back and complete this purchase.
Exactly.
So. Yes, I looked at flights on Delta and then I just got distracted. I'm going to go back.
So that's the problem, right? There's little things like that I think you've got to take out of that, and that can be as high as 20 and 30% of those purchases.
Yeah.
And so you've got to get some of those signals out of that, some of the noise out of it, and then we'll get, but I think we're going to get better. We're going to continue to get better, but we're in a place where we're very happy with the direction we're going.
Yeah. So mobile, when we started, we did these sort of 5 big trends, and mobile was one of them because we've seen this gigantic shift that everyone was predicting for years, but it really happened.
The year of mobile.
Yeah, the year of mobile.
Again.
7 straight years, and then all of a sudden it became completely true. How big of a challenge is that for you? Because a lot of these systems are architected for desktop display, and now all of a sudden the world's going to mobile and to video. So how do you end up?
Mobile's tough. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest hurdles in this industry now, is the ability to use all the platforms, all the data, and all the things that we've put in place over here, and now we've got mobile, and it actually is the year of mobile, or probably the second year of mobile now going into this year. Yeah, it's a struggle, and I think it's going to continue to be the case. I think if you look at the ad tech industry, you look at mobile and video, it's why those companies are exploding, is because so much investment is going to continue to go to those platforms. The consumers are already there, and so how do I tie those devices together? But how do I tie those devices together across the whole ecosystem? Not just in a Facebook platform or not just in a Google platform, but how do I tie those devices to a human being across the whole ecosphere?
So it's mostly a data challenge.
I think so. I think that's the biggest one, because I can target, I can get to those people, but how do I know you as this mobile phone, on this computer, on this television set, on this print magazine, and in store? And I think stitching together those consumers is where the biggest hurdle is going to be. But once you start to stitch those together, and again, it's across the whole ecosystem. I think that there are solutions, and our solutions coming out when you look at, again, at the Google platforms and the Facebooks and those kind of people. But I've got to do it at scale, and I've got to do it across publishers. I've got to do it what's good for me, not just what's good for Facebook.
Like, what percentage of visitors to Kraft properties are now coming through mobile? I mean, recipes and whatnot, I would guess it's pretty
significant. Significant. I mean, we're following the same trends as you're seeing in the industry.
So like 50% or more?
Roughly, yeah.
Wow, it's amazing. So if there was sort of one thing that you would like to see change in the industry between like now and the next year, like what would be your number one wish?
I think it's accountability. When you look at what we're buying, the accountability lies on us to vet that information. The accountability lies on us to say it's working, it's not working, it's viewable, it's not viewable, it's actually a female versus a male. And when it's not, the make goods are really tough to get to a good place. And so I think the accountability on what we're buying, the impressions, the data, the frequency. I mean, the frequency is another huge one. We talk about frequency. You got to be kidding me. I can open up Facebook and I can get served 30 ads of the same ad in a day. Yet I've got a 30 cap on the month, right? And so there's make goods in this industry, but at the end of the day, what I'd like to see is a cleaner ecosystem, a cleaner delivery cycle where we're getting what we pay for and there's a backing behind it across the board.
Yeah, and you don't have to, I'm sure it sounds like you're playing like a game of whack-a-mole.
Right? It's a constant game of whack-a-mole. Today it's viewability. You've got viewability, you've got frequency, you've got the data issues, you've got all the vetting stuff. It just all comes down to attribution. Am I selling more product online? But tomorrow it's going to be something else, some kind of ad fraud, some kind of something where people are taking advantage of the fact that we're pumping so many dollars and you can't reconcile this stuff on an impression by impression by impression basis anymore. It's going too fast, the volume's too high, and so the accountability from the publisher side, I think what you'll start to see is big advertisers like ourselves start to consolidate our spend behind the partners that we believe in, that partner with us to let us know what's going on, why, and stand behind that product.
Okay, so fewer, bigger.
Yeah, I think you'll start to see that consolidation because I can't reconcile this stuff. I can't vet this stuff on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, want to open it up to questions? We have a couple microphones. Just put up your hand.
Hi there. So I work at Netflix, and we have a similar issue that you do in terms of gauging the quality of third-party data segments, because we do use them a fair amount as well. So if you could talk a little bit more about the auditing process and what that looks like for you, it would be helpful to get some perspective there.
Yeah, so understanding, one, how, just the classification, right? If a consumer is in a female, high-income, trendy bucket, right? What are the actions, what are the triggers that put that person in the bucket? But then when, right? The timestamps of when those are put into those buckets. So is it a year ago? Is it 6 months ago? Is it them targeting that? Is it purchase data? So understanding the supply chain. So let me think. Timestamps, it's what puts them into those buckets. And then there's a couple other auditing things we do, but it's really understanding that supply chain. Because a lot of data that we buy, like they'll say, I have no idea.
Right.
No idea.
Are you getting that information from the provider? Or
You have to.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, because there's nowhere to do it.
Yeah. You have to do it
outside
direct.
of that realm. It makes sense. Okay, got it. Thanks.
And then looking at those partners and saying, if you can't answer those questions, we're probably not going to buy that data anymore.
Okay. Any others? Anyone?
Question?
Anyone? Over
Bob
here?
Taser from Assembly. Do you need to put into like terms and conditions that you expect that the data that you're getting is the data that you're looking for? And then can you explain a situation where you did get a make good when you had ordered females and ended up getting 50-50% results?
Yeah, I mean, you can get the make goods and you can put it all in the T's and C's all you want. At the end of the day, we're looking for the partners. This is what I was referring to a little bit on the consolidation. We're going to find the partners that are willing to work with us because the data is never going to be perfect and it's never going to be perfect out of the gate. But when we want a standard data set, we'll talk to our partners and we'll say, this is what we want, this is what we're looking for, this is how it has to be formed. And they will go out and we'll work with them, and it's that ongoing relationship. And so we can enforce it through make goods, and there are a lot of times where we've gotten the make goods, but at the end of the day, it's that repeat business. We do a significant volume. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars kind of in this space. Partners want to be partners for long term, and so I think you see, at least from a Kraft Foods perspective, we're much more successful, and the partners we kind of walk hand in hand with versus having to have kind of the stick of the make goods.
Okay. Bob, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay.